Okay, well, welcome to the Kaplan Center course on exploring the writings of Ira Eisenstein, and particularly what we mean by religion and creative Judaism. We're really delighted that so many people have expressed interest. I have three levels of excitement and joy to acknowledge. I want to do that quickly. The first, and perhaps the most important in some ways, is my delight that you're having two really fine people, teachers, people who have lived reconstructing Judaism for a long time, sometimes in the same congregation, the Reconstructionist Synagogue of the North Shore, and have also known personally in very important ways Ira Eisenstein, Rabbi Ira Eisenstein, whose writings we are exploring. So very glad for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't add, for me, it's a special treat. Both Lee and Harriet are good friends, dating back, in Lee's case, to the early 70s when we were rabbinical students together and working together at Society Hill Synagogue. And in Harriet's case, not so much longer, later in the decade, in the 70s, 1977, I had just graduated rabbinical school. Harriet was a fixture at the
It was the
Reconstruction
year
Synagogue
before
of
you graduated, Jeffrey.
Hmm?
It was the year before you graduated. So,
Revisionist history strikes again. Thank you, Harriet.
right,
Okay,
right. Well,
that is true. But what is also true is I was just going to be in my sweet spot of the educational consultant, and again, Montracht and Gottlob. That was the year Rabbi Ira Eisenstein had a heart attack, and so I had to step in, got to step in rabbinically, big shoes to fill. But one of the benefits was Deb and I had a home away from home that was Harriet and Sid Finer's home. So these are good friends. It's been a light reconnecting with them. It's also been extraordinarily important at the Kaplan Center to open up what we call the Ira Eisenstein portal, realize what a significant contributor he was to reconstructing Judaism. And at first, we called it a portal just because there's another section of the website. But the more I've talked to people, I think there's a more metaphoric sense in which he is a portal for understanding Mordecai Kaplan. To quote Josh Davidson, a graduate of Camp Havaya, reflecting back on his understanding of Kaplan, he's really hard to get. We need a way in. So some of you have been in and understand deeply and have a whole set of questions, and others I hope will find Ira Eisenstein's books as navigated with to great navigators, teachers, Rabbi Lee Friedlander and Harriet Finer, a wonderful experience. And of course, the third level of delight is look who's here. We have 25 people signed up for the course, 15 of whom are here tonight. A number of people couldn't make it. That is why we record these sessions. So I hope you're comfortable being recorded. And I am going to turn it over to Lee and to Harriet to begin our exploration. So again, thank you. Thank all of you.
I can't, I think you need to let me in again for the,
Okay. Fair enough. I will do that.
I don't know whether I'm in or I'm not.
Harriet, we can both see and hear you.
You can.
Yes.
All right, I can't see you guys. So Lee, if you, you do
I'll
all
cue you.
calling.
I'll cue you. Yeah.
Because
So welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here, and also to see some new ones. But Harriet and I thought that we would start this session talking a little bit about our experience with Ira. Harriet noted at one of our meetings, I think it was our second meeting last week, that it's billed as people who had experience with Ira. And we thought that we would each take just a bit of time to talk about that. And we also decided we should go in chronological order. So although Harriet is much younger at heart than I am, she knew Ira longer. And so please, Harriet.
Okay, here. I came from a secular Yiddishist Zionist family that had no synagogue affiliation at all. A friend brought me to the SAJ when I was 15 years old, and there I met Ira. And I joined a youth group led by him. Although I can't recall the specific content of the sessions the discussions that we had, I do remember very clearly the warmth, sense of belonging, and informality of the group. There was total respect for Ira, but we didn't call him Rabbi Ira even, just Ira. I came away knowing something of the meaning of Reconstructionist thinking, understanding that being Jewish was relevant, important, and even more importantly, fun. That encounter with Ira changed my life. Ira was an inspiring teacher who clearly believed that sharing his love of Judaism with upcoming generations would help to ensure the Jewish future. With the same end in mind, a few years later, in 1946, just after the end of World War II, Ira opened his home on Friday evenings, probably twice a month, if I remember correctly, to college students. About 50 to 75 young people gathered. We sat on the sofa, on chairs, on the floor, wherever we could find a spot. Each session grew larger as attendees invited friends. I always wondered whether the furniture survived that year. Anyway, there we spoke about the existential issues facing young Jews on the cusp of adulthood just after World War II, at a time when we were just beginning to learn more and more about the Holocaust. As always, Ira was committed to addressing the tradition critically and with intellectual honesty. I think that an important part of Ira's legacy was his ability to teach and explicate Reconstructionist ideas. For example, he wrote the books that we're going to be addressing in this workshop. And he wrote them to explicate Kaplan's thinking and make it more accessible to those trying to understand this new Reconstructionist approach to Jewish thinking. And when I think now and think back, 1947 was pretty early in Reconstructionist thinking, and in the it was not so long after Judaism as a civilization. My experience obviously reflects a very limited view of what Ira contributed to the life of the SAJ. I can, however, speak in more detail about Ira and his work at RSNS, the Reconstructionist Society Synagogue of the North Shore, my shul. I hesitate to say, and the shul of some other people on this Zoom. I hesitate to say that Ira was our rabbi. It would be more accurate to say that we were his project. Along with all of the other movement-wide things that he was doing. However, I can say unequivocally that without Ira, we would not be the congregation we are today. True, we were an intrepid band trying to build a congregation that would meet our intellectual and spiritual needs and educate our children as well. But without Ira, the consummate teacher, we would not have grown as we did. In addition, we owe Ira for establishing the college to educate the wonderful clergy like Lee, who have continued his work at RSNS and helped us to remain strong. Ira, and with him, Judith Kaplan Eisenstein, his wife. Wait a minute. Here we go. Came to us every other weekend. I asked two couples who joined in the early days at RSNS to share some of their recollections. One replied immediately, God came every other weekend. Both said, imagine, they came to our home for dinner. Even God came to dinner. They continued, we came to love them, and the children loved them as well. At any rate, they came on alternate weekends and had Shabbat dinner at different congregants' homes each time they came. At many of our homes, at least until COVID, we do not cut challah after the blessing. We break it and throw a piece to each person at the table. Why? Because that's how Ira did it. Though they were only with us for this limited weekend time, they quickly became an integral part of the congregation, of the community. I say they because they were a team. Judy taught us music, and we became a singing congregation. One year, Judy gave a course on the history of Jewish music on successive Friday nights. It was fascinating. We were, by and large, a Friday night congregation, and we still are. Every Friday night, we davened largely in song, and then Ira spoke, always without a note, about an issue that was currently important to the Jewish community. And then he encouraged discussion. We didn't need too much encouragement. It was always a lively discussion. And in the end, Ira summed up, and what summations they were. Just a minute. I'm using. He would pull together an organized statement, including all of the points that had been made, as well as a cogent analysis of the issues at hand. As we grew in membership, attendance grew. Most of our members came regularly every Friday night. We came to sing, we came to discuss, and to hear Ira. And as time went on, we came to see our friends. Soon after coming to us, Ira began a Shabbat seminar, which met around noon every Shabbat that Ira and Judy spent with us. Each year, we studied a different theme: philosophy, history, Zionism, Talmud, and on and on. This seminar continues to this day and continues to be well attended. When bar mitzvah families expressed the need to get to know Ira better, he found time to meet with them. For many years, Ira and Judy joined us at synagogue weekends when we had weekends in the country. And those weekends offered an opportunity to get to know Ira and Judy in an informal setting and to deepen friendships. Later, Ira lent his dignified presence to testify at village hearings when we were involved in a lawsuit around permission to use property that we had purchased for a synagogue. The case is currently taught in law schools. By the time we won the suit, we had outgrown the property of the building. However, we felt so proud to have Ira as our spokesman. He was phenomenal. While he was with us, he was also working to found the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College and to strengthen the Reconstructionist movement. We were just a little bit of his work. As he shared this work, the work that he was doing, Many of our members became active in furthering that work. And so I think we had several members who were chairs of the college board. Ira's wisdom and ability to openly examine issues and live the evolving religious civilization was a model for all of us. Years later, I visited Ira at his home in Washington toward the end of his life. He told me about a visit he had had from a group of RRC students. They were expressing differences with some Reconstructionist ideas, and typically Ira, he responded by telling them that it's now up to them to further the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. I think that probably Hans and Doris, and I think Carol, who are on, could say more, but I guess it's Lee's turn.
Thanks very much. And I love what you said about the congregation being his project. I'm looking at Jeffrey and I'm looking at Bob, and I think we could also say that we were Ira's continuing project and the like. Harriet and I have some crossover years. I want to talk about Ira's spirit and also a little bit about how he saw life. Because I think it informs both the books that we're reading. In the spring of 1997, Ira sent me a 3-sentence handwritten note in response to a 5-page single-space type on my portable typewriter, carefully composed letter. The note read as follows: "Dear Lee, thanks for your letter. It was cathartic. I'm glad that life is moving along." And the final sentence: "Unless you move into the last decade of the 20th century and get online, this will be my last correspondence with you. Fondly, Ira." At first consideration, it might seem that at age 90, Ira was still pushing me 40 years his junior to embrace modernity. But in the context of my 30-plus long relationship with him, this note was still another indication of Ira's embracing the fullness of life and all of the possibilities that it holds. His faith, as was articulated by Rabbi Richard Hirsch, that God is found in the affirmation of potentiality and in the belief that reason can help us discover what is godly in the world and within ourselves, was not merely an intellectual principle. It's what defined his life concretely. It was expressed whenever he played 4-hand piano with Judy, even as she scolded, "Count, Ira dear, count, for God's sake, count." It was evidence when he challenged, as Harriet mentioned, new students to change Reconstructionism themselves after they articulated a concern that it was not meeting their spiritual needs. And it was found daily when he went online, not just to stay in touch with family and friends, but with colleagues and students, and to discover and to participate in all the world had to offer beyond his apartment. I have 4 very brief vignettes that I think centers my understanding of Ira and things that I see reflected in the books that we are reading and will be reading. So my first encounter, I was directed to the rabbinate by my Uncle Sam, not by Tante Annie's second husband, Shmuel, but by my other Uncle Sam, the one with the top hat and the striped pants, whose "I want you" finger pointed at me by way of a notice from selective service in the winter of 1968. My draft counselor, Dr. Maurice Friedman, professor of Jewish studies, who introduced me to Kaplan's writings in a course on Jewish existentialism, had recently been appointed to the interview committee of the then 3-month-old Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. He urged me to meet with the college's president, Ira Eisenstein. So a few days later, I sat down with Ira for what would be the first of thousands of conversations. He assured me that I was an excellent candidate, given my yeshiva background, my undergraduate studies in religion, and my acceptance into Temple's doctoral program in Jewish studies, which was then a requirement for the college. One obstacle remains, however, Ira noted. We have no precedent for a mid-year admission. Might this lack of precedent be due to the fact that you have not yet had a mid-year? I asked. An excellent observation, Ira cheered. So this will be the chance for us both to make history. Directed me to Rabbi Arthur Gilbert, alav hashalom, the college's dean, to convene a meeting of the admissions committee a week later, in preparation for which I read so much of Kaplan. This proved to be completely unnecessary, inasmuch as the members of the committee were more interested in my talking about me, especially how I reconciled my Orthodox Talmud-based Jewish elementary education with my growing up in a secular Jewish household, and how my studies in Zen Buddhism informed my allegiance to Jewish peoplehood. Ira was silent for the hour and a half of the interview until Rabbi Gilbert called for final questions. After clearing his voice, Ira asked me to account for what he called the blemish on my academic record, a C in golf. After defensively noting that the grade was not figured into my cumulative average, I confessed, I just wasn't very good at the game, and I didn't know well enough to cheat. That is an excellent quality to have in a rabbi, Ira proclaimed. My acceptance to the college signed by Ira arrived 2 days later, setting me on the path toward becoming who Ira would help me to be. Sitting at that interview, I could not have imagined that 12 years later, I would be chosen to serve as rabbi of the Reconstructionist Synagogue of the North Shore. I had not considered applying for the position when it came on our Rabbinical Association's placement list. The congregation had what could be called a reputation. Besides, it had been and was still in spirit and devotion, excuse me, Ira's congregation. And following Ira, I thought was at least hubristic. But Ira urged me to apply. But they're too smart for me, I argued. You're smart enough, Ira countered. And you have so many interests in common with them: art, music, dance, poetry, and a critical reverence for the New York Times. In addition, if you go to the North Shore, you will always eat well, Ira promised. Well, everything that he said proved to be true enough for Joy Levitt to place her trust in the community 3 years later by joining me in a venture called 2 Rabbis in 3/4 Time. Judy loved that. I had many occasions throughout my years to consult with Ira on congregational matters. The first time was after a second-day Rosh Hashanah discussion on the merits of keeping the traditional version of Avinu Malkeinu. It's a very long and still somewhat painful story, but I thought that the congregation was acting hypocritically and against their intellectual principles. So, of course, I went to Woodstock to visit my rabbi, to Ira, the religious rationalist who had weaned generations of Jews from the irrationality of pre-modern theological supernaturalism. Surely he would understand my position. When I finished my whiny narrative, Ira declared me to be an idiot. Reason is not what people want when they come to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's not what I want, and I suspect it's not what you want either. What they want, what they need, is community with the people sitting next to them and with those who are with them in their memories. They need to know that they are still connected with the God of their grandparents, the God who lives in the melodies and the words that they sing, even if they no longer believe in that God. Judaism will evolve and needs to evolve, but it must still touch the heart even when it's inconsistent with the head. Don't tinker with what the soul needs now and again. Think of it as a leavening for the intellect. Don't trade one orthodoxy for another, he instructed. By the way, he wrote that to me afterward just to get his point across. He sent it in an email. I had someone download it for me. My last meeting with Ira, the last time I saw Ira was at the Rabbinical College, and it was at the dedication of the new library center. Ms. Savat, who had provided the major funding for the library, sent her grandnephew to speak on her behalf. Every Sunday, my Aunt Goldie and I have blintzes and sour cream at a deli in the DC suburb, he began. This past Sunday, I suggested a more elegant alternative, given we were celebrating her 92nd birthday. What's the matter? She asked me. You don't like blintzes anymore? And so we lunched on blintzes again this past Sunday. So, Aunt Goldie, what would you like me to say at the dedication? Tell them that I came to America, the eldest of 6 children. I wanted to go to law school, but I had to go to work to help my widow mother. So after a couple of months of secretarial training, I began working at a law firm. I gave half of my first paycheck to my mother, and with the other half, I bought General Electric stock. I continued this practice of investing 50% of what I earned the many years that I worked. And as a result, I amassed a small fortune. My pledge is to give it all away before I die. And I am delighted to give some toward training rabbis for a Jewish future. Ira was the last to speak that day. As always, he basked in the wonder of it all. When we started the college, I never dared dream that we would ever dedicate such a building for our library. We didn't know whether we would survive even a single year. It's truly, can I say, miraculous that we are here on such an auspicious occasion. I have, of course, prepared remarks, but I am putting them aside to address Ms. Savad's great nephew directly. Next Sunday, when you see your Aunt Goldie, please tell her, I'm 93 years old, I'm single, and I love blintzes. Should we or shouldn't we? Mordechai Kaplan died less than 2 weeks after our first daughter, Sarah, was born. Unprepared to leave her, Joy and I had to decide what to do about Shiva. If we brought the baby, would people judge Sarah's presence to be inappropriate or disrespectful? So we worked out a plan for me to make a quick getaway with the baby if necessary. Judy was the first to spot us when we entered the apartment. She was stoic and practical as always. I'm almost 80 years old, and already I'm an orphan, she stated sardonically. When Ira caught my eye and saw the baby, he pushed Judy aside. Never mind you, he said to me. Hand that baby over right now, he demanded. Holding Sarah against his heart, he mused. Look at this ear. Anyone who can see such an ear and deny the existence of God is a fool. Ira always looked to life, to the possibilities that came from founding a rabbinical school and mentoring students, to his refusal to be encumbered by any form of orthodoxy, to an appreciation of the generosity of people, and to the sense of wonder in the everyday that most people miss. I really love the guy. I miss his insight, his wit, and his delight in the world. He certainly is a blessing to all of us who knew him. And I hope that these qualities of Ira, you'll see them shining through the book as we read it, especially his emphasis on possibilities and also on growth. Jeff, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to review these works, which I haven't looked at in years, actually, and also for the opportunity to work with one of my treasured teachers in the practicality of Reconstructionist Judaism, Harriet Feiner. And for bringing us together for some wonderful discussions and more discussions to come. As Jeff mentioned, I think that the question behind the question of these seminars, these times for us to get together, is a meta level question. Which is were Kaplan and Eisenstein men of their generation or men of all generations? And to understand their teachings, to begin in our times and also in their times as well. So Harriet and I thought that a good place for us to begin this session or to deal with this session is to look at the crises that Ira mentions in the first, I think it's part A of his book. It's the first several chapters of his book. I think it's the first 4 chapters of his book, to take a look at the crises that he points out, that he identifies, and to ask what crises face us today. But first, for a very quick summary review, Harriet and I both both of us expect that you will do your reading so that we will not have to regurgitate or reteach what Eisenstein says, but it doesn't mean that we won't do some review so that you can begin to focus and remember. So points of crises articulated by Ira. I think it's very stunning how he begins the book. He says, many Jews today do not want to be Jews. And when I speak of these, I hope people have pencil and paper so that you can jot down anything that you want to go back to. We'll have instructions for you at the end of the section how you might proceed. But many Jews today do not want to be Jews. And again, remember, this is a book that was written the year after Judaism as a Civilization, revised in 1953. But 1953 was 75 years ago. So we're talking about almost a century ago. And why would Jews not want to be Jews? Ira says because they want to ape Gentiles, and because they want to disassociate themselves from Jewish life. Jewish life is much too burdensome, Ira suggests. He speaks also about the evolution, and he speaks more about this later in the book, about historical evolution. But he mentions that before modern times, that is before the Enlightenment, Jews were a corporation, were a corporate people, not unlike Christians and Muslims, who based so much of their lives on otherworldly goals. That is, in obeying God, so that they could find a place in Olam Haba, so that they could achieve salvation. Of course, each of these religious traditions understands that in a different way, both the path and also the goal. But the goal is apart from, or was apart from, the world. What Ira notes, and Kaplan notes, of course, not only in Judaism as a civilization, but also in greater Judaism making, is that with the wonder of the modern world, people don't really have time to consider the world to come, because the world that we are in is so splendid and has been made more splendid by the opportunities that we have to achieve a good life. The concern that Ira had because of this was that, again, Jews would leave the particularity of Judaism and would join the rest of the citizens of nations where they were enfranchised in looking to build a great life in our world. He ends the first chapter with this quote. It's almost a summary. But what of those Jews who found life agreeable in democracies, who, despite some economic discrimination and social exclusion, felt quite at home where they were? Could Jewish life have any meaning for them? Ira certainly speaks, by the way, of anti-Semitism being a problem, but he also understands that that the possibilities of life would override that. And he continues, "This is the problem most American Jews face today. Is there some purpose to which Jews can dedicate themselves, which will bring back to them something of that joy in being Jewish, which their ancestors had? Is there some way of changing Jews' minds about their Jewishness so that they will no longer regard it as a burden?" He follows this first chapter with these very poignant questions, looking at three other considerations, which are the generators of change and challenge. The first came with the rise of the modern state. That is the ability for Jews to become incorporated in the greater society, which meant that they had to abandon some of what made them Jewish, particularly the longing of a homeland and the return of a homeland. If you were a citizen of a state, of a nation, you could only have one nation. You couldn't be looking at the door away. Also, that nations, of course, also promoted intermingling among their citizens, which meant that Jews would have to have social intercourse with people quite they would have to intermingle, and there would be the possibility of intermarriage. Ira's talking about intermarriage is very, very striking in this book. And of course, his attitude changed. Now, that's for perhaps next time or another time. Also, Ira was concerned that what united Jews in exile through the centuries were this internationalism, these international connections, particularly in law. And of course, if people were citizens of a state, they had to obey their own law. And because of public education, Jewish education would be squeezed into after-school hours and becomes secondary by nature and time. So that was the conflict that arose within the modern state. The modern economic order was also a challenge to Ira. He was concerned about people having to put Jewish tradition aside in order to make a living. And he was also concerned that Jewish institutions were so expensive to be affiliated with. And finally, he sees modern thought as a challenge to the Jews of his time. I was speaking today about the 3 Bs of Judaism to someone over lunch. Believing, behaving, belonging. And of course, one of the great challenges of the modern period was the challenge of a science and what it might have to say about traditional forms of Jewish belief, particularly about God and supernaturalism, and at the same time about this concept of Jews as a chosen people. That also would kind of unbalance this idea of belonging. That is, that if we are not the chosen people, and if we are citizens of another nation, what does that mean about the Jewish people post emancipation in the modern period? And then, of course, behaving. And this is based, of course, on the foundation of Torah and the mandates of Torah, and the infallibility of Torah, what was considered to be the immutability of Torah, and how could that survive in times where revelation, the nature of revelation, was being challenged. And then, of course, there was the balance of ritual laws and ethical laws, and how do we find that balance? Ira ends this section by saying, thus, modern thought conflicts at many points with traditional Jewish ideals about God, the Jewish people, and the Torah. So, Harriet, we threw out a couple of questions in our mailing to you for this first session in anticipation of the first session, understanding that we would never, ever, ever get to any more than one of them. And so Harriet now poses the first question, and we open it up to you. And this is probably the longest we'll ever speak at any session. So Harriet, if you'll take that.
Okay, so as Lee said, creative Judaism was written in 1936 as a précis for Judaism as a civilization, and revised in 1953. At the beginning of the book, well, I think that Lee has addressed what the beginning of the book is about, and he identified the challenges that existed for him at that time. And we're asking, are the challenges the same for us? And what new challenges have come to the fore since 1953 that challenge us now? So we really want you to start thinking or responding to what was then, how much of it is still now, and what are the differences now? Perhaps the differences in emphasis.
Want people just to unmute themselves and
Yes,
jump in?
that would be great, Jeff. Yes, if you can. And if you have trouble doing that, you can raise your hand. And
Lee, you're going to have to, because I can only see 6 windows.
I understand. I'll help out. I'll help. Jeff is here to help a lot.
You'll have to recognize people.
Yeah, no, I will. So, where are we at in terms of our challenges that we face as Jews? Yeah, Richard, please. Yeah.
I feel that it's harder today because in 1952, we were closer to the Holocaust. And today, a lot of the young people really have no feeling for Judaism.
So, Richard, that is so interesting. So, what was let me ask you this: what you mentioned the Holocaust, and you've selected the Holocaust. Did that was that the trigger for your Jewish identity as a younger person?
Probably because when I was a younger person, we heard about the Holocaust constantly. I was born in 41, and we were lucky not to have anyone really affected by the Holocaust directly from the family. I think I had one uncle killed in battle, but we were given that feeling of having to belong to the Jewish people. Now, as an adult, when I don't know how I feel about God, I have found study of the Torah to be an enlightenment, because I feel that whoever wrote the Torah, if we're saying it wasn't handed down by God, was extremely bright, because they knew more about humankind than other civilizations back then, about sibling rivalry, about having to take care of the earth. That has and Reconstructionism has reawakened in me that feeling. Also, when Roberta and we've been married now going on, well, we've known each other for 43 years, going on 43 years, been married for 41 years. And we always felt that supporting the Jewish faith and belonging to a synagogue was very, very important. And we found you, Lee, after a Conservadox temple, synagogue, where the rabbi was no good. and we realized when we joined Reconstructionism that that's what we are.
Thanks for that, Richard, and thanks for the tribute. That's very nice. I see Hans and I see Carol, and we're trying to focus on challenges that we have, the crisis, not the challenges that we have as a people. Yeah.
You know what? I could just wanted to put something in here. And I wonder, when we think about challenges, we want to think about them for our generation and for the generation that's coming up. I mean, for me, it's my grandchildren's generation, the next generation. But for many of you, it's your children's generation. And as we think about the continuity of Judaism and the challenges to that continuity, let's focus a little bit on that as well.
Thanks, Harry. That gives us a really good focus. Hans and then Carol.
I just want to disagree a little bit with Richard in that, to me, the being an emigre from Germany and the Nazi, and my father having been in concentration camp, enhanced my Judaism and made our home a much more Jewish home than my forefathers had. in the enlightened German assimilated situation. And so I've grown up initially as very assimilated and found that due to the Holocaust and due to the persecution, not only our family, but our children and grandchildren have very strong ties to Judaism. And I hope that this can continue for further generations.
You know, again, it's interesting that we keep focusing on basically on the role of anti-Semitism in keeping us Jews. What if, well, I can't say what if anti-Semitism doesn't exist because it seems to exist, but I'm wondering a little bit about whether there are positives as well.
Positive. Well, and again, we're thinking about challenges and the like. Carol, I don't want to keep you from out of line.
Because I might forget what I was going to say. Thank you.
And I might forget to call and I might forget who you are. So, you know.
Right. So I'm looking at the screen and thinking, where are all the young people? So why weren't young people attracted to what I consider this to be an extraordinary opportunity to really learn about how we began and contemplate where we're going? And so I think that the emphasis now has changed radically why people become members, stay members, are active in a congregation, why they join a congregation. To begin with, I think that most young people aren't so interested in the things that we're discussing now about our beginnings, or about any of the intellectual things, let's say, that they were very interested in when our congregation was founded, for example, or when the movement became what it is. So I think that the whole thing has changed now, in that community is where we're all at, and that people join and remain members because of the friendships they have created. And that because of that, not only the Reconstructionist movement, but certainly the Reform movement has moved away from, or has moved towards more social activities and more activities where people can come together and know one another, and frequently know one another intimately, so that the groups that they become a part of within the synagogue structure become part of their lives. And then they're not here so much for coming to services or any of that. They want their children to be educated as Jews, but they want their children to form friendships within the Jewish community. So I could say a lot more, but I'm not going to, but that's how I see, because I'm a true Reconstructionist RSNS member, and that's what we talk about a lot, and that's what we see a lot.
Let me, I'm interested in what you said, because, you know, our congregation certainly is now greener than it is grayer. And that is that we continue to welcome families in, and they continue to come in for what they come in, and we have the faithful who come to seminars and the like. Ira's beginning statement was, many Jews today do not want to be Jewish, do not want to be Jews. would you say, and I'm asking this, oh, and I see a hand up here. Oh my goodness, I see Lauren Beth. Um, I want to hear from them first. And while we're listening, would you say that for the young Jews that you know, and not only, of course, not only in our community, but in your families, would you say that Jews today do not want to be Jews? But first, I want to hear from Laura and from Beth. And are you? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Beth. Yeah, I think actually we're in Montreal, so I'm basing it on people I know here, but also young people that I kind of interact with on social media. I think that we have, in our congregation, we have a lot of new families, so people in their 30s, but the younger people, they might come for events, they might come now and then. We have a few young single people, but I don't think they join. And I think what Rabbi Ira said about the cost of joining a Reform temple has transferred itself to our movement. Young people can't afford, I'm not sure what it costs for a single person now, maybe $1,000. I don't know. That's quite a lot.
About that.
But I think also we're going to see among young people, the reaction to the war in Israel. A lot of the young people that I'm seeing, like comments in social media, a lot of people have lost friends. A lot of young Jewish people have lost non-Jewish friends. And even, conflicts between Jewish people as well. But I see a lot of people saying they've lost a lot of their social life and a lot of their contacts. Up until now, I would say, we're in two civilizations, and young Jewish people took full advantage of the other civilization. And they're young Jews, they're proud to be Jews, they identify as Jews, but they might intermarry because they're so invested in both sides, in both civilizations. But what seems to be happening now is that there's such a backlash against Israel, a backlash against the war, an increase in anti-Semitism. And I think young people, young Jewish people are going to need support. And I'm not sure how we can do that, but I think we have to be aware of what's happening to them and how they're losing a lot of their social contacts.
Wow. I see so many hands now. Oh my goodness. On my screen, it reads this way: Jeffrey, Bob, Carol, and then Jane.
Unmute.
Jeff, you have to unmute, honey.
I'm unmuted, but I want to wait till the other participants have a chance.
Okay, sure.
Go last.
Bob.
Well, I first wanted to say, by the way, that in preparing for this series, I completely destroyed my old original copy of the first book, but surgery was successful and it's now glued back together. I guess I'd say that, let me just say something about my generation. I'm about to turn 69. And then my daughter's 33. I think that had I not discovered Kaplan by chance on a Cape Cod beach sitting with my mom, I would have very little connection with Judaism. And currently we belong to a Reform synagogue, and I cannot for the life of me understand why people are there. But it looks to me that the most challenging thing I think in my generation now is the multiple hyphenations. I don't think I know Jews who don't want to be Jewish. they just have commitments to in so many different directions, to so many different identities. I'm one of those. I mean, I'm more at any given day. It's hard to say like how many hours am I more connected to my musical world? How many hours am I more connected to my Jewish world? There's no real competition there, but I know a lot of Jews of my generation who just feel these constant kind of tugs, but don't have. I was really shocked to read and be reminded of Ira's statement that a generation where Jews didn't want to be Jews. My daughter, who was a graduate of a conservative day school, spent years in the socialist Zionist summer camps, Hashem Hatzair. She started there the year before our own camp started, which things might have gone differently had that been the case. She and her husband have the strong feeling that they were lied to in their education, that they were lied to about, that they were taught how to be hyper fluent in reciting prayers and extreme minutia expertise. And despite the fact she grew up in a rabbinic family and was a child of somebody who was a pulpit rabbi for some time, the force of her in school environments and peers was really, really stronger. And she saw no meaning in that, but doesn't want to not be Jewish. But I guess it's pretty alienated. And there's something about her generation that even more so than mine seems to have this kind of Ira-like thing of either it's true or it's not, right? If it's true, great. If it's not, forget it. The last thing I wanted to say is that I think that we're so pigeonholed in such small echo chambers. When I look at the people I've retained as friends and lost as friends since October 7th, it's all about whatever particular echo chambers they happen to be in. That's within Jewish life, outside of Jewish life, between social, job, and other affinity kinds of affinities. I think that's a major difference now. And I don't want to overplay the social media thing since it's talked about so much. But I think that really is kind of a wrecking ball in a lot of ways to Jewish life. That's a challenge. Obviously, the flip side of that is like, here we are online.
One of the things you seem to be suggesting is that what we're seeing in younger generations is not an unwillingness to be Jewish. In other words, it's not that they're saying, I don't want to be Jewish. It's how do you be Jewish? And is there really content to their Jewishness? Or that seems to be the focus that you're suggesting. And I think that is a focus that we're seeing.
You're right. And what's disturbing is that, at least in my family, there's every good reason that they'd have good answers to those questions, but don't seem to, despite all of our best efforts.
Right.
This is, I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that as we journey further into these books. Carol, and then Jane and Jeff.
So the first thing, Lee, I wanted to tell you, Ira was my father-in-law. I'm married to Miriam. I was the one who taught him how to use the computer. So
why did you teach his first
computer? Adam Paul, all connected. So you can blame it on me.
Yes.
The one thing I was going to say about young people, there is a huge difference between the kids who go to camp, the kids who go to day school, the kids who go to any kind of an educational experience. It changes them dramatically. I'm a member of Adat Shalom. I see that in our kids. Hebrew school's not enough. They need more. You know, as good as some of the Hebrew schools are, ours is not so great. But if you add camp and you go to day school, and you know, camp is huge. Our camp and all the other camps, sending them to Israel, to an Israel program. And I totally agree. There's this huge divide. I see it in my congregation with the parents who have 20-somethings, you know, who are members of If Not Now. You know, they can't talk about Israel. They can't talk to them. The divide is huge. On the other hand, I have, you know, our grandson, who is a senior at a Jewish academy, is in Israel for a month now, picking strawberries and oranges. His entire class is there. So there's a huge divide in the kids and their education and how they feel about Israel. So I think that's something we have to really think about. The educational experience is crucial in making these kids feel Jewish, want to stay Jewish, and want to be committed to the Jewish people.
Yeah, that certainly was an issue that Ira pointed out and felt even in 1953, or even in 1953, when people came from very Jewish, rich Jewish homes and rich Jewish experiences. One of the things that Harriet and I commented on, and it also refers to something that Carol mentioned, was the congregation. When she talks about a do-it-yourself congregation, there were people who were educated to do it themselves. And now people are very, very much dependent on rabbis, cantor, and educators for fundamentals. But Jane and I see Joan and Jeff, I'm going to put you last.
Just one quick comment. If we suggest that camp and day school are important, and I think they are, the issue that Ira raised earlier of cost remains an issue, I think, today, because day school, if you're sending a few children in a family to day school, it's a huge expense. And that, again, there may be people who would send their children and who can't because of the cost. So that seems to me to be a similarity between then and now.
Yes. Jane.
I have a slightly different tack. I'm a member of B'nai Keshet in Montclair, and I am struck by the number of young people, and not so young, who were not born Jewish or were half, you know, come from a blended family and were not brought up in with much Jewish tom, who have come and sought out the opportunity to join the Jewish people as Reconstructionists. I have an African-American high school classmate who went online and looked at all different, she was brought up in some form of Christianity and came to Reconstructionism. And years ago, when I was involved with the JRF, we had, you know, we had inquiries from all over the world. From Brazil, can you be a Brazilian and be Jewish? We had congregations in Denmark, in London. But I mean, what is striking me most vividly is these young people, college age, a lot of college age in our congregation who have made the decision to cast their lot with us as Reconstructionists. And a lot of it is through the internet. They found us that way. So, I mean, that's a positive slant to this discussion.
In a sense, you're raising another issue that Ira raised, the issue of intermarriage. which he saw as totally, which at that point was really an exit ticket from Judaism in 1950.
And not as much now.
And today it's perhaps an opportunity because you have, I think that at least from my observation, and I think from some statistics, that more of the families who intermarriage choose the Jewish side, choose to remain Jewish families. So again, I think there's a little different focus on the balance in 1953 and now. I think you had some more hands, Lee.
Yes, yes, I see, Joan, and then Jeff, I'll give you the right to pass before Carol comes. So please, Joan. You're muted.
My kids would think that's good.
Well,
I can. Thank you, Lee. Hear that wherever you are. I came from a mixed background. My father's side was very traditional conservative, and my mother's side was ultra reform. And both sides of the family became very close to each other. That was a wonderful model for me, to have both be so close. That's a long story how that happened, but it meant that I could see two sides. I belonged to two synagogues, a Reform synagogue and a conservative synagogue for my initial years, and loved my cousins, still do, and my aunts and my uncles. But eventually it became more of a challenge. My father died and my mother married someone who was Jewish, but who was kind of an anti-Jew Jew. And so he had two previous wives, one Catholic, one Protestant. And so I had stepchildren, and that suddenly made the household very different for me. I also grew up in a school where I was one of only two Jews, the other being my sister, and faced a great deal of anti-Semitism. So I had a pretty harsh introduction to that. But I loved being Jewish. I really loved being Jewish. And I think that that early exposure that I had to very committed family on my father's side really helped. They were close knit. Some lived next to each other. Before that, they had apartments above and below each other. And my grandfather, at one point for a while, lived down the street from them. He was upset with us because we lived 20 minutes away, and so I was lucky to have that. But I majored in Near Eastern and Judaic studies at Brandeis, and I studied there for a brief time Reconstructionism. I was attracted to it, but I couldn't see how it could possibly work until after I lived in Israel going to Hebrew U, I went to Arnie Rocklis's synagogue in Evanston. I became head teacher there. And I very definitely became committed to Reconstructionism. I realized it really could work. It could function, and beautifully. And so I was committed to that. So I'm just giving you the timeline here, and I'm going to rush now to the timeline of my kids. I always regretted that it was so hard for me to learn Hebrew as an adult. And so I started in college and then in Israel. I wanted to make sure that our kids had a full background in Hebrew, in knowing Israel, etc. So we sent them to day school all the way through high school. And Rachel, we sent to a Jewish camp and was interested in another camp. And they're both very committed Jewishly. I think we lucked out in that. But my concern is exactly one that Harriet raised, and so did Ira. The tremendous expense. We were fortunate that we could pull it off. Meant we couldn't do other things, but the tremendous expense of sending kids. Right now, my son wants to send his kids to day school. He's got a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old, so he's not there yet. But in the area in which he's looking, it costs $40,000 after you hit kindergarten to go to day school. That's as much as college. What we paid was as much as college at that time too, for a good, for a reasonably high level college. So he is a lawyer. He might be able to pull it off. I don't know. But that's serious money, especially if you're going to pay for college. So I don't know what to say on the aspect of cost. I know this. It was an investment that I believe paid off in our family, because I look at our kids and how committed they are. We went to Germantown Jewish Center, which most of you know. And the nice thing about that is there were 2 minyanim, one of which I belonged to, and there is the main sanctuary. So I always figured if I joked around that if my kids ever rebelled against me, I didn't have to worry about them leaving. They'd just go to another area of the synagogue, which is exactly what happened. So choice was part of it, giving them choices, and they had choices. And so, but I do worry, because I think that education helped them make choices knowledgeably. They knew Judaism in and out. I don't think an afternoon school provides that usually. So that's my concern.
Thanks.
All right. So you're really suggesting that in our society, that now the preponderance of children go to, if they get any Jewish education, they get it in after school education, but either after school or weekend, and it's very limited. And so the educational background of Jews seems also to be where before you had an immigrant generation that perhaps was more steeped in, they knew, even when they ran away, like my family did, they knew what they were running from. And they picked up something else. I mean, they remained Jewishly committed, whether it was to Zionism or Jewish socialism or whatever it was, gave them a strong attachment, whereas the current generation doesn't have that.
And Harry, a perfect example of that is my daughter went to a Habonim camp. She's committed to Habonim. She's not religious, but she is close. She is committed Jewishly. And so I'm very happy with that. And she also works for a Jewish foundation. And so she has that exposure as well. But she rebelled, but she ended up going to Habonim. So, that was just fine as far as I was concerned and Dallin was concerned. So, I'm done. Someone else.
No, I'm just conscious that we're 5 minutes away from closing. I want to give you an assignment from Harriet and from me. I know that Carol Capper had something to say, and then Jeff. So
let me defer to Jeff, because it's not much time anyway, and I'll have other opportunities. I'm not worried about it.
Carol's a fellow Mayim Rabim congregant. I won't let you defer to me.
Oh.
Share, and then I'll be briefer.
And we'll be patient.
Okay.
And no one's going to close this at 7:30 exactly.
I have a very different experience and ideas from what I've heard so far. I am Jewish, so, but I grew up in in an atheist household. I mean, my father was from Austria, and came when he was 10 years old, but he was a socialist that, he was an artist. He wasn't interested in the more bourgeois elements of synagogues in Detroit anyway. And but he was a Zionist, and he was very, I mean, we lived in a Jewish ghetto in Detroit. I didn't know anything about anyone else until I moved when I was 17 with the family to California, to Santa Monica. And then I was the only Jew in every class. So that was a big reversal. But my grandparents, who I was absolutely adored and who were Russian immigrants, you know, I never even realized until I was older that they really observed the Sabbath, because they never talked about it. My mother never talked about it. They never tried to influence anyone. But my grandmother would light the candles, and if I was over the house, she'd be salting down meat, and she'd go, you know, and they would go to this little shul. But it was sort of more of just something from Russia, is the way it was. My mother was also an atheist, and that was the tenor of the house. So very, I can't explain it, very Jewish. And I'm the only one in the family that is connected to a synagogue and that has been connected to synagogues. And I'm never in the mainstream of the synagogue, but I get what I want from it. But I'm more of an internationalist. And my daughter, who I did send to a conservative synagogue where Steve Sager was the rabbi, and she loved him. And I liked his literary kind of approach. He was masterful in the service, like no other rabbi I met was. But she loves being Jewish, but she's married to a non-Jew. And I don't mind at all. I mean, I mind a little bit just because. But he's the right person for her. And so I have a grandchild, and it's really out for grabs whether he will get any kind of a Jewish education. My daughter would like him to, I would like him to, but I mean, not a day school. And that's the other thing. I taught in Maimonides school in Boston, in a Jewish day school, and I liked it, but I want to tell you that the kids were very limited in terms of the world we live in. I can't even explain how they had no awareness of other peoples in the world in a lot of ways. They were bright and nice kids, but when I heard on TV yesterday this woman being interviewed in Israel, and Israel's another issue for me, because I'm more with the young kids than, you know, about what's going on in Israel now. And so I'm just trying to hit a number of things that I think, and yet I consider myself completely Jewish. I like being around Jews. It's a different way of relating, and it's a different history. I'm interested in the Jews historically, in politics, in texts. I'm not so interested, I'm certainly not interested in Orthodox ritual. When I say teach at Maimonides school, I taught English. But so I'm listening, and I'm hearing things, and that's just for starters for me. I have other questions. I've read most of the creative Judaism, and it's interesting to me, but it's a little more focused on Israel, and I'll be wanting to know what people think, that if Kaplan would have, what his response would be to today.
Yep,
So anyway, I don't want to take up more time than that.
Yeah, I think that's I think that is very much an issue that Harriet and I raised with one another. How that would figure today, Jeff. If you wouldn't, and then I just want to close for 2 minutes.
Sure. I'll try to make some comments staccato-like, very quickly and pointedly, and then one more spacious comment. In the 1950s, 10% of the Jewish population who got a Jewish education went to day schools, 90% to supplementary or communal schools. Today, it's more like 60-40, which leads people to be optimistic, some to be optimistic, saying that Judaism's growing stronger at the core through this exponential growth of people connecting to day school educations, but weaker at the periphery. Kaplan and economic justice. Eric Kaplan, the Kaplan who writes about Kaplan with a K, Mordecai Kaplan, says very deeply, has a lot of passion around this, that everyone expects Kaplan to have been talking about civil rights and Blacks and issues that are important today. He had some awareness of that, but it wasn't the crime issues. Interestingly, there were two prime issues for him. One was women, and we know the work that went on there, and the other was the structure and this economic and social inequities within a congregation. He was furious that wealth dictated what was right in policy, and he lost some jobs because of that. Carol Blumenthal, thank you for noting in a quick scan of our Zoom screen that our natural demography of people who are interested in Kaplan Center offering skews towards Gen X, boomers, the great generation, and that's who we are. But we would like to do a different or several different versions of this course with this resource. But here's the key. Jeffrey Shine can't be their organizer, and Lee Friedlander and Harriet Feiner can't be their teachers. It has to come from them. So we're looking how to do that. And my final sharing comes from the work of Rabbi Eugene Borowitz. And to me, it's always been a wonderful window into what's different between the generations. Borowitz says, to understand today, and he's writing 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but I think it still holds somewhat, you have to understand that most American Jews are inverse Marranos. What does that mean? Marranos were afraid to show their Jewishness in the streets because they might get beat up, but they could keep it comfortably in their home. Inverse Marranos, and I think this is a real phenomena, are perfectly fine in the streets, will wear their Magan David, will go to a demonstration, but in their homes, they're terrified of what it means and how it means to celebrate Judaism. I think that's a dynamic. And I thank people for really wonderful sets of comments that make me very eager for weeks 2, 3, and 4. Lee and Harriet, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Wow, Jeff, thanks for putting that all together for us.
I had time. I waited.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. This is actually a suggestion from Jeffrey, and I think it's a wonderful suggestion. As you read on, identify a phrase or a couple of lines that you find remarkable, either particularly edifying or particularly puzzling. And you can do both as you continue on with your readings. Harriet and I felt that before anticipating our examination of Rabbi Kaplan and Rabbi Eisenstein's I guess prescription for Jewish life, we want you to think about what holds you as Jews today. And Jeff, I'll ask you to save that survey from Bernie Reisman that we sent you. Maybe we'll use it next time as a focus. But we want you to read about about Ira's analysis of the movements and see what of those movements have contributed to just general Jewish life, and then read Eisenstein as sort of like the amalgamation of that. See what he takes out and see what he lets go of. But I want you to use your lens in order to judge what Ira and Dr. Kaplan have to offer us in their reconstruction of Judaism. So it's next week at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
I assume we're keeping the publicized date rather than the informal date that Lee and Harry and I found out. 7 o'clock. That's working for people. 6
Yeah.
o'clock here in the Central Time Zone.
Yeah,
Great.
no, I like that time very much, Jeff.
Okay. And next time I'm going to use my iPad because then I know I'll get all of you will be able to see you all at once.
That would be great.
This was
If
really
I could-
frustrating for me.
Because it's
If
so
I
nice
could just
seeing
put a-
everyone all at once.
a finer point on the suggestion that I made to Lee
Please.
and Harriet in terms of finding something selection. It has to be at least a word long, can't be more than a paragraph. And it's where the greatest meaning lies for you in the text, because it has some real wisdom or challenge, and it's optional. I think Lee and Harriet, I'm sure that this is your pedagogy here. People will have a chance to share that, to read that, a little bit of sacred reading. You found Kedusha, holiness, in this few sentences, but it's not required. So if you don't bring it to the table, you can still be part of the discussion, but it'll be interesting to hear what people focus on.
The only requirement for this course is that you be well, that you try to find cheer in the world, and some and to try to act kindly. That's the requirements, and if we can do that, then I think at least we'll bring some little patch of serenity to one another. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeff. Thanks so much for setting this up. And Harriet will talk.
My pleasure. Do you
Yes.
and Harriet want to hang on for just a moment as other people exit, just in case you have something
Yeah.
you want to touch base on?
Can
That
I
was-
just say that I'm very
I'm
hungry?
not going to close down the meeting.
Can I just say that I'm very hungry for this? That's why I attend the Kaplan Center programs. I am very enthusiastic about this, and it's everything I hope for. So thank you. And I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to the coming weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you,
a very
everybody.
Have a great
Harriet.
week, everyone.
And
Thank you. It was a very nice session.
Thank you. Thank you, Hans.
Hey.
Hi, Doris.
Of course, I do remember you from, I do remember you. Your faces are very clear to me from several decades back.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
They're the same old
Laura
same.
and Beth, nice to see you. Carol.
Very good. It was great.
Very
You were-
good. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Hans. Bye, Doris.
Well, I think they spoke for themselves, huh? Felt like a genuine and enthusiastic response. How did you guys feel about it?
Harriet, you
I
go.
think- You know, I wish I had been able to see everybody because it's good to see people's expressions and, you know, someone shaking their head yes, someone shaking their head no, and all of those things. But I thought that there was good participation and people were addressing the issues as they saw them. And you
Yeah.
had much variation, so that
Yes.
we touched on many different points.
You have the whole Jewish world spread out in front of you, from
Yeah.
culturalists to Zionists to,
Right.
Yes,
secularists. That's
Right.
really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't expect to have that much diversification among the participants, and it's always I would love, and I don't know whether it's so important for people to be more focused, and but I guess everyone starts with themselves and has difficult letting go of that.
It's the lens they see, again, that says something about Jewish life, because many people may only have their own lens and
Right.
not have a larger picture.
But I really feel very positively that you let people introduce themselves in their lens, and I think there'll be a gradual drilling down into the creative Judaism and the what we mean by religion rather naturally. But if they couldn't introduce themselves, then they weren't going to really engage in the long run. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel that too. I do feel that. And I also think that necessarily we'll have another 40 minutes with the other sessions, because we won't have those we won't have to introduce ourselves in terms of Ira. So I think it might have also led to sort of like the kind of conversation that people chose to be engaged with. But yeah, no, Jeff, again, thanks so much. Thanks for coordinating all of this for us,
It's my
doing.
job.
Oh, well,
That's my job.
thank you for doing such a great job.
Well, thank you. Nice to be working with the two of you. I meant what I said in the beginning. And I
Yeah,
think it's a really wonderful start. Harriet, if you want to get on a little earlier and do you know how to share your screen? Have you done that before? Because I
Yes.
could look at what you're seeing when you come on, maybe.
What I'm not going to come on the computer. You see,
Okay.
I just downloaded Zoom onto the computer today. I always use the iPad.
Your iPad.
And
Okay.
I suddenly thought about 25 people, and I can only see a maximum of 16 boxes on the iPad. But we don't have 25 people. We only have 16.
Well, we had 17 individuals, but only 14 screens because
14
many
screens.
people were coupled,
So
and
in my
I think we'll have 2 or 3 more next week. So
right.
yeah,
So even if we have 2 or 3 more, I'm going to be able to see all
I
on the
think so.
iPad. The
I think so.
iPad works fine, and so I don't think I'll have a problem. I don't
Great.
know. I don't know what I I must have made some error in the downloading because
Who
it's
knows?
Okay, listen,
Um,
guys.
I'm going to send out a note to people, just to everyone, and for the people who weren't here, I'm going to give the question or the invitation to them. Do you want me to say, what else do you want me to say about just continue to read Creative Judaism? Do you want me to, like
Yeah,
you could do it, except it's just easier if I pass it on to Sheridan.
I
What
think that would
section?
be, I'll tell you what I'll do, Jeff. I'll write something up today
Great,
or
great.
tomorrow. I'll
Okay,
by Harriet, and we'll send it out to you no later than tomorrow afternoon.
that's great.
Okay,
Really
and
good.
okay, thanks.
Okay,
Thanks, Jeff.
Erica, have a
okay.
good
Yeah,
evening.
Erica, Harriet, I'll talk to you about when we can meet.
All right.
Okay,
Let me know when
Okay.
you.
I'll
okay,
talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care.
bye-bye. Again, thank you. It was a great start.